Hello, everyone, and welcome to Kilowatt Podcast about electric vehicles, renewable energy, autonomous driving, and much, much more. My name is Bodie, and I am your host. And on today's episode, we are going to talk about EV news. But before we do that, I have to exercise a little bit of frustration. So on Friday, my Logic Pro stopped working. Don't know why. Uninstalled, reinstalled, the whole bit. Logic Pro is what I used to record this episode in, and it just wasn't working. It kept airing out. On Saturday, I was finally able to get it to work, which is great. Um, on on Saturday night, I went to record the episode, and now I'm getting this weird doubling from my Wave XLR. I had there was just a bunch of stuff that I had to uninstall, reinstall, and I don't know what fixed it, but eventually it started working again. But now I'm getting this doubling, which means I hear an echo in my headphones while I'm talking to you, which is very distracting. So I've got the echo turned down as much as I possibly can while still hearing the podcast. Because I don't know if you know this, but when I make mistakes, which are plentiful, I have to go back, cut out the mistake, and then start over as if there was no mistake ever there. So I have to have some audio in my headphones that's coming from the computer, and it's just constant echo, and I don't know what's going on. All right, this is 30 minutes later from the last sentence you just heard, and it turns out the problem was some of my effects that I run, and I'll have to figure out what's going on with those at a later date and time, but they're turned off for now. So hopefully, I'm still getting a little bit of echo, and I don't know where that's coming from, but it's not as bad as it was. So let's just go ahead and let's do a show, shall we? Podcasting's weird. Sometimes everything works great, and other times it's days of frustration. And I'm in the days of frustration phase. Let's start off with a correction. I mentioned on Bart's episode that he was looking at buying a Polestar 3, which was a mistake on my point. He's looking at buying a Polestar 2, or you would prefer to buy a Polestar 2. The problem was at the time of the recording, Polestar did not have the newest version of the Polestar 2 in Ireland, so he wasn't able to purchase it. Now, there is an update on Bart's journey. I'm not going to share that with you right now because that's Bart's to share. Hopefully, we'll have him on in a month or so, and we'll all hear the conclusion of Bart's EV adventure. And one more thing before we start, we have some patrons to thank. And all of these patrons signed up in 2023 and 2024. So here we go. We're going to go with Don, Jamie, Chris B, Gene, Scott, Electron Raceway Fabricator, Charles F, Just Another Nick, John B, Paul, Charles S, Steve K, Kiwi Graham, Patrick, and Brad. I want to thank everybody I just mentioned for supporting the show. It really does mean a lot. All of your contributions go back into the show to make the show better. None of it goes into my own pocket to pay bills or anything like that. So you are truly supporting the show. So thank you to everyone who supports the show on Patreon. If you would like to become one of those folks, go to patreon.com/kilowatt or supportkilowatt.com and you will be taken to Patreon. If you don't like Patreon, that's okay. A lot of people don't. There's actually a link in the show notes where you can sign up and take part in Acast Plus, which is something similar where you also get an ad-free experience as well. All right. Let's start with the news. I mentioned a few episodes ago that Fisker Ocean issued a few recalls. Some of those recalls were over-the-air updates. Some of them, 2 of them to be specific, you actually needed to take into a repair center to be fixed. At first, Fisker was like, hey, we're going to pay for the parts, but you have to pay for the labor. And then they reversed that decision and said, nah, we'll pay for the labor too. Now there's some additional confusion because the National Highway Transportation Safety Administration actually recently just issued a statement saying that they're aware of Fisker's original statement and they're working to ensure owners will receive recall remedies without charge as required by law. Now, this statement issued by the National Highway Transportation Safety Administration has caused some confusion within the community on whether or not Fisker is still planning on paying for those repairs or not. I think this is maybe a problem with timing between when Fisker said, hey, you know what, we're going to pay for this, and when the statement was released by NHTSA. So I don't think this is a big deal. Fisker reversed their initial decision, said that they are going to pay for it, and it looks like it's required by law that they do pay for it. So I would imagine that that's exactly what's going to happen. Now, if you are a Fisker Ocean owner, and I know we have a few, and actually, you know what? This is weird. Um, I right around the time Fisker was going through their issues with, uh, bankruptcy and all that stuff, and it was kind of their downfall. They were still a company, but they were also still shipping cars. I saw a lot of Fisker Oceans, and then I started seeing less and less, and I went for a long time without seeing them. And over the last maybe 3 or 4 days, and listen, I look for electric cars all over the place. Over the last few days, I've been seeing more and more Fisker Oceans again. So I would imagine some of those are the ones that I've seen in the past, but there are enough of them that make me think maybe people are taking advantage of the really low cost of the Fisker Ocean right now. But anyway, back to the story. If you own a Fisker Ocean and you're concerned about where you're going to get serviced, outside of whatever Fisker is may or may not pay, if you're worried about how am I going to get this thing fixed when I need it to be fixed, the Fisker Owners Association, FOA, a nonprofit organization formed to support Fisker Ocean owners, and it's not affiliated with Fisker Motors at all. This is just a group of people who have come together to basically support one another. They have put together a network of service centers to repair oceans in US and Canada. There are 21 service centers in the US and 3 in Canada. Now, I will say that this is probably just the beginning. This is not the end of the list. This is the beginning of the list. I'm sure that they would love to have more service centers in Canada, especially when you just consider how large Canada is. 3 isn't going to really cut it. But I love it when people come together and they support each other to solve problems. And that's exactly what they're doing with this group. If you would like more information, and it's a cool resource, go to fiskeroa.com, and I'll put a link in the show notes as well. There's actually a lot of really neat information on there, even if you don't own a Fisker Ocean. Lucid Motors has opened up a hub in Detroit, Michigan. The hub will house teams of hardware engineers, research and development, operations, and more. It looks like Lucid is trying to smooth out some of the rough spots in their R&D, production, and manufacturing processes. This is going to give Lucid access to top-tier automotive talent. I'm excited to see what comes of this hub. We'll keep an eye on it and report back to you. Hertz is selling a few 2023 Chevy Silverado EV work trucks on their website. These vehicles are going for around $63,000. Looks like these vehicles have between 6,000 and 11,000 miles on them. I'm not sure if this is a good deal or not for the work truck. I found some new Silverado EV work trucks at dealerships by my house, and those were right around $64,000 to $75,000. So if you're looking for one of these Silverado EV work trucks, I would definitely look at Hertz's website, but I would also look around and see if you can't get something close for a brand new pickup truck. GM Cruise is planning on rebooting their self-driving testing in California. So they're going to do this in Sunnyvale and Mountain View. I'm going to tell you right now, GM Cruise is not well liked in the Bay Area, and they weren't well liked before one of their vehicles hit and drug a pedestrian. I will say that Sunnyvale and Mountain View are not San Francisco. San Francisco's got its own special set of traffic issues, and Sunnyvale and Mountain View are not as bad as San Fran. But GM's already starting in a really bad place in terms of reputation in that area. So I think it's going to be an uphill battle. Hopefully, they will always have somebody in the car. I do think GM Cruise should continue testing. I'm not saying they shouldn't. I'm just saying maybe that part of California or that specific part of the world is not the best place to enter back in. Like they've probably got agreements with California, and that's why they're doing this. But yeah, seems like a mistake. Let's see here. We got two more stories in our EV segment. The UAW is considering or threatening a strike at some Stellantis plants. From what I can gather, the UAW, which is the union, and automotive dealers for Dodge and Chrysler are both of those groups are not happy with the mismanagement of the Dodge Chrysler brand by CEO Carlos Tavares. Some of the issues that one or the other group has are increased inventory, job cuts, broken promises on reopening the plant in Illinois. Dealers are complaining that the CEO made short term decisions in order to post record profits in 2023, which sounds great, but the decisions were reckless and could hurt the company in the coming years. And they said the decisions made the company anemic and diminished and decreased market share. You know what? This is a good one. So we're going to cover Stellantis's Q3 2024 earnings call because I'm sure it will be fascinating. So we'll cover that whenever it comes out next quarter. And our final story in this segment, electricforall.org has a new tool that will show you all of the EV incentives in your area. Now, this is for the US only. So if you're outside the US, I apologize. But if you're inside the US, all you have to do is enter your zip code and it will tell you the tax credits and rebates in your area on new vehicles, used vehicles, and lease vehicles. It'll also give you charging station incentives, and it has a home charging advisor, that will tell you, hey, maybe you should be on this plan because of the EV discounts and that kind of thing. So it's definitely worth looking into. It also has some of the driving perks in your state, like can you use the HOV lane or not? Does your state have, an alternative fuel vehicle parking incentive? Like one of the things that I could get a credit on my electric bill is if I joined SRP's EV community, then I would get 2 to 3 months later, I'd get a $50 credit on my electric bill. It's different in every area, but it's definitely worth checking out. All right, that completes our EV news. Let's move on to our Tesla news. Tesla has officially sent out invitations to the Robotaxi event in Burbank, California. This will be held at the Warner Brothers studio. It will be on October 10th. The invitations say "We Robot," so stay tuned. We'll cover that on the 10th. And as we're coming up on Tesla's, big breakthrough with Robotaxi, according to them, big breakthrough, a third party tested Tesla's full self-driving software and determined that there was an intervention every 13 miles. So AMCI is an independent automotive testing firm. They drove 1,000 miles using FSD 12.5.1 and 12.5.3, so two different versions of FSD. They had a 2024 Model 3 Performance with Hardware 4. They had the vehicle on the assertive setting. They drove all sorts of different environments, including city streets, highways, mountain roads, and freeways. They also drove at daytime and nighttime. AMCI reported 75 interventions over that 1,000 miles, which averages out to every 13 miles. Now, based on what I told you, you might think that AMCI did not feel that Tesla's full self-driving was up to snuff, but quite the opposite. They shared a bunch of videos that you can go watch, but their overall impression was that FSD is impressive, but the driver could overly rely on software and become complacent, which has the possibility of becoming dangerous, obviously. So the director of AMCI testing had this to say: "It's undeniable that FSD 12.5.1 is impressive for the vast array of human-like responses it does achieve, especially for a camera-based system. But its seeming infallibility in anyone's first 5 minutes of FSD operation breeds a sense of awe that unavoidably leads to dangerous complacency. When drivers are operating with FSD engaged, driving with their hands in their laps or away from the steering wheel is incredibly dangerous. As you will see in the videos, the most critical moments of FSD miscalculations are split-second events that even professional drivers operating with a test mindset must focus on catching." He also added this: What's most disconcerting and unpredictable is the way that you may watch FSD successfully negotiate a specific scenario many times, often on the same stretch of road or intersection, only to have it inexplicably fail the next time. I've actually had this happen myself. Whether it is a lack of computing power, an issue with buffering as the car gets behind on calculations, or some small detail of surrounding assessment, it's impossible to know. These failures are the most insidious, but there are also continuous failures of simple programming inadequacies, such as only starting lane changes toward a freeway exit a scant tenth of a mile before the exit itself, that handicaps the system and casts doubt on the overall quality of its base programming. They actually have some videos on their website showing the successes and failures of full self-driving, and they said that they have more videos to come, and I'll put a link in the show notes. But I do think this is interesting, especially when you consider in, 2 weeks we're gonna get an announcement from Tesla at their Robotaxi event, and my guess is that, and this is an educated guess, but it's not really that hard to get to this point. But my guess is that Tesla will announce Robotaxi, and then they'll have to start testing it with like drivers in the front seat, and it's gonna be a while before it's a full robo taxi like what's that company Waymo is. It's gonna be a little bit different. All right, I have one more story in our Tesla segment here, and it's a weird story. It came from the Model Y subreddit, so take this with a grain of salt. But in Arizona, Phoenix, Arizona, a young lady goes to take her driver's test. She's a child, teenager. Her parents let her borrow their Model Y so she can take her test for her driving test. In Arizona, you have to take a written test and a practical test, which means you actually have to go out and drive. Initially, she passed both the written and the practical test. Unfortunately, the computers were down at ADOT, so she was unable to get her physical license that day. So the next day, her and her mom go back, and they were told that the instructor thought she was using FSD during the driver's test, and she would not be receiving her driver's license. Her mother actually took the time to explain how FSD works, and then she also explained that the car was not equipped with full self-driving because they didn't buy that package, so it's impossible for that to be the case. There was some back and forth discussion between the mother and the staff at the facility, and it sounds like there was a fundamental misunderstanding, it's not going to surprise you, of how FSD works. So when it was actually explained, the issue came down to the daughter did not touch the brake pedal enough during the drive. And it was thought that the car was auto braking because they don't understand how regen braking works. Her mom did explain how one pedal driving worked, but ADOT refused to issue the license. She did eventually get her license, so that's the good news. But if all of this is true, then there's a fundamental misunderstanding of how these vehicles work. And if you're going to be testing people so that they can get their driver's license, then you need to be familiar with all the vehicles that they're going to use. And, this isn't specific to Tesla. There are other cars that do this kind of thing, or a form of this kind of thing, the one pedal driving. And the proctors need to be familiar with the capabilities of those vehicles because it may be that the Model Y is the only vehicle in their household or they only own Teslas. Like, how else is this person supposed to take their test? It's the vehicle that they learned on, it's the vehicle that they're driving on, and it's not going to change. Now, I do think it's important that people learn how to drive on multiple different types of vehicles, right? Back in the day, 35 years ago almost now, when I was taking my driver's test, I used an automatic. I used my mom's vehicle, and her vehicle happened to be an automatic for the test. But my dad also taught me to drive his F-250 plow truck, which was a manual. My first 3 or 4 vehicles were manuals, which is great because I didn't have a lot of money back then, and batteries, in my point of view, were expensive. So anytime a battery would die, I would not replace it. I would just put the vehicle in neutral push it as fast as I could and then jump in and pop the clutch to start the vehicle. That was a very frequent occurrence in my teens and early 20s. I can't do that anymore. But anyway, my point on this is that if in the same way that the proctor said, "Well, you weren't touching the brake enough," the my proctor could have said in my automatic vehicle, "Well, I didn't see you shift the gears at all. So because I didn't see you shift the gears, you didn't pass." So technology is going to move forward. We all need to move forward. And especially if you are going to be testing folks, you definitely need to have a better idea of what these vehicles are capable of and how they work. All right, I'm not going to beat a dead horse on this, but more training for all. And by the way, I also looked into this a little bit. This is not just an issue of Maricopa County here in Arizona. This is actually an issue that has happened a few times in several different countries. So yeah, just it's an education issue. So let's get educated. All right, everybody, that is it for me. If you want to email me, you can do so. It's Bodie, Bodie, at 918digital.com. You can also find me on Twitter at 918digital. And yeah, if you want to join the Patreon, go to patreon.com/kilowatt or support Kilowatt. I hope you all had a wonderful week. I'm going to go figure out why my computer all of a sudden decided to revolt. Maybe, and this is, the UAW is about to go on strike. Maybe my computer and the software that's on it is about to go on strike. I've been doing a lot of podcasting lately, so maybe it's just giving up the ghost and saying we're not going to do it anymore. We need more vacation days. I don't know. So thank you all for being patient. I will talk to you on Tuesday.